Hello, and welcome to the Tech Startup Show. In this episode, I speak to John Rush, a serial entrepreneur and software developer. He has been involved in the creation and management of over 30 startups. Most recently, Mars, an open source development tool for building apps from microapps. We talk about the future of programming, Mars, microapps, and so much more. So let's jump straight into it. Hi, John. So do you want to just start with telling us a bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I've been programming for the last 20 years. I started as software engineer and first job as a software developer in a startup. And it was a startup, really exciting startup. And very quickly I realized that I want to be not just a software engineer, but I want to run a startup. So after the first year of that job, I started my own startup. And since then, for like last, I think 18 years, I've been doing tech startups until now.
Mm-hmm.
Although it happened in Oslo, Norway, and now I'm traveling around, currently staying in Istanbul, amazing place, Turkey.
Nice. So you're somewhat of a digital nomad these days, is that right?
I was, but now I have children, so
Oh yeah.
it's time for me to settle.
Yeah. And what is the main startup you're working on at the moment?
My main startup is called MarsX. So we're a low-code platform that helps developers build software through reusing microapps. And microapps are made by third-party developers. It's full-stack little apps such as chat or login or admin portal, etc. So the idea here is that Mars projects don't have everything in there. Like usually 10 or 5% of your project is unique and the rest you can find in other places. And the idea with Mars is that the common stuff you don't have to build from scratch. You could just reuse it from the microapp store. And the microapp store is a place where developers make their living on that. They're building full-time these microapps that you can just pay very little and use and save a lot of time and get higher quality output. Because imagine a group of people who are building a chat for 3 years, they have built amazing chat. And if you do it yourself, you're going to be building little crappy chat, not that good at the beginning because you don't have time for that.
Mm-hmm. So these micro apps, how are they different from things like microservices or other APIs?
Yeah, so the main difference is that the microservice is a backend thing and API is a backend thing. Front-end libraries are the front-end thing. So you either have front-end, backend, or database stuff, while the micro apps are full stack. That means that if I get the micro app chat in my project, it's not like I get just the look and feel and I have to build all my logic on the backend, or the other way around, I get the backend logic, I have to build the front end, because very often the stuff is interconnected so much that it takes a lot of time to build one of the parts. Like if you get the backend stuff to connect with the front end, it's not just one API call. That is like 20 different intercalls, right? That's why we realized that you have to have micro apps that are full stack that can be installed. And from the moment you install, it kind of works. But your job is to make sure that it works with the right data, you connect them together. But by default, it works from like first second you deploy it.
Mm-hmm. And technically speaking, how does Mars use these micro apps? How does it interact with those?
So we have built our own IDE that's based on TypeScript and JavaScript because we had to build our own IDE to control the developer experience. Why? Because imagine if you're using, our idea is that in a typical project, there are 35 features and 30 features can be the micro apps. And imagine now you're using 30 external apps that have their own code, etc. In the normal world, it will be almost impossible because it's a lot of dependencies and imagine you have to change something in micro apps. And in our case, the idea is that we're going to change stuff in the micro apps very often. have to start another project on the side, make a fork of that library, do something, then maybe make a pull request, or just bundle the code and bring it in, and then you have to like that. So it's almost impossible. That's why people don't do that. Like, you either use the library, if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, you build something on your own. You don't really add the library because it's a lot of work to set up a project on the side for the library. With Mars, we have our own IDE where all the microapps get together with the code, and then you can build your project and you can modify microapps right in one place. You don't have to switch the projects or stuff. It's the microapps get embedded into your project, all of them, so you can edit the code together with your own code. It's kind of similar process.
Mm-hmm. And when you have these micro apps, do you essentially need to rebuild the entire front end aspect of it so that the style is consistent between all the micro apps? How does it work on the front end side of things?
Yeah, so you have to do both, front end and back end. You have to do some work there. And the idea here is that we don't expect that the micro app can just fit in perfectly, because every project is kind of innovation where certain little things have to be different than it was before, right? That's why the way we see it is a 95% starting point for you for every app or every feature, every segment of your system. And then the remaining 5% you have to go in and do. So the micro app has the code for backend, for frontend, and you go into the backend and you do some little finish touches to make sure that it works with for example, we have reviews micro app, but the micro app for reviews has no idea what's the entity that has to get the review, right? Is it a movie? Is it a product? So it comes without that knowledge. And instead of having this, complicated configuration system where you have to configure some database fields, etc., what we did is a different thing. It comes in, it works with some dummy table that comes with it, just so that you see how it works. And you remove the dummy table and you just replace that dummy table with your real table, with the real table. In that case, the developers of microapps don't have to anticipate all possible configuration that you can ask for. You can change the code. If you can change the code, there is no need for a bunch of settings there, right? So you change the code on the backend to make sure it works with the right entity. Then you go to the front end, and let's say you want to embed the reviews to a certain place. So the microapp provides sub components that you can just render everywhere in your system, and just renders the stars, or it renders the list of the reviews. And the reviews come with all the logic of editing, deleting. So it's not just front-end components, it's a full stack components. And if you want to change stars parts, you just enter that part of the microapp, and you find that star is actually SVG, and they just change star from SVG to other SVG, and then you have hearts, right? So basically, you can just modify the code both for backend and for the front end. And we made it so simple that that's the normal process. It's not like things are going wrong when you have to modify. It's rather things are going right when you have to modify. That's part of the process of coding in Mars. It's modifying every single microapp you get into your project.
Mm-hmm. And if I want to build and publish my own micro app, how does that work?
Yeah, so that thing has been working on the dark market almost. So it was in our private Discord group. We managed that, but this year our plan is to make it open so that every developer who knows Mars can publish the microapp. So you build a microapp. Any project can be a microapp. So basically, Mars itself is a bunch of microapps put together in a large microapp. So basically, if you build your project, let's say you're trying to make Airbnb clone for London, because you have some ideas that they're different from Airbnb, and you do that, and you don't succeed eventually, or it doesn't go the way you want it. And in normal world, you're kind of sad and you have to, put that code aside and just forget about it. In the Mars world, you take that and you make it into the micro app. It is a micro app already, so you do some little stuff that has to be done to wrap it up, and then you put it on store, and then everybody else in the world who needs exactly that, some guy in Argentina wants to do local Airbnb, for example, and they can take it and you can monetize that. So basically, it's not just that you have to be the micro app builder who publishes the apps to the store specifically, but you can also just build your stuff, and whenever you think that you're okay to push it to the rest of the people, push it to the app store, and people can buy it, and you can end up making money by selling it as a micro app rather than selling it as SaaS, right? You can combine these two models as well, because very often the micro SaaS model works in a way that it's not really competition. Others can also use that. Why not, right?
Mm-hmm. And does MarsX have a marketplace for micro apps?
Yeah, so we have marketplace for micro apps, and the way it works that we have two options there, two business models. So one is where developers pay flat fee per month, and they can get access to all the micro apps. So then the micro app builders have to opt in for that. And then it's similar to Netflix and Spotify. The micro app builders get their share of the revenue. So for example, like your micro app has been used that amount of times in this many projects, and the MarsX has made certain profit. So it distributes all the profit to the micro app builders eventually. And the second model is that you can put the micro app there and charge per usage. That usually happens with large micro apps. For example, we have these guys who made a marketplace micro app. It's really good micro app. You can build any kind of marketplace for hairstylists or for massage or for tutors, and they sell that directly. So it's like one-time license. So usually their customers are startups. They come in, they pay one flat fee, and they get the whole IP and the code and everything. So it's almost like sold as white label. And they can also sell it on the monthly fee, like $100 a month, and then they use it.
Mm-hmm. And Mars is free/open source, is that right?
Correct. So when we say Mars is free and open source, we talk about engine. So the engine is free and open source. Imagine Mars is an iPhone. So, and imagine that the iPhone is free, but there are apps on the iPhone, and some apps are free, some you have to pay, because apps are created not by Mars, apps are created by the builders. And the builders can decide to put it for free. Some do it for free, some make it freemium, and some bundle it up to the common subscription that's called Mars subscription, but eventually it goes to them, right? So it's similar to this. There is this gaming subscriptions where you pay one price and you can access all the games, or you can buy a game one by one. So same thing here. But Mars itself, the engine where you run the code and the micro apps, is free and open sourced. Why? Because that means that you are not dependent on this company. So once you launch your server, and you can launch Mars on your servers, right? And when you launch it on your server, you're independent. You have to pay to the micro app builders to acquire their micro app. Once you acquired that, they don't control you. If they go out of the business, you still have the code. You can keep going with that. You can keep moving that whole thing forward. So that was the idea behind it.
Mm-hmm. And where did the idea for Mars come from?
It comes from my own pain and experience. So I was building software for startups for like 10 years, and I was seeing this same challenge all over again. Like every time I start with a new startup, we have to build a login, we have to build forget password page, we have to build the admin page, the search, the gallery, cookie banner, and then all the complicated things like a tree, a sidebar, the tables and filters and all these things. and no project is the same. And I thought, like, how could we, do it same as the science does, where in the science, if I discover something and you discover something, then the whole world knows that they can use it. Nobody has to discover that thing again. And that's why we can kind of, move up. Well, in software development, I felt like it's not going up, it's going actually sidewise. Like, I started in 2002, and since then, I felt like in 2005, developers were more productive because there were less platforms. There was just the Windows platform, right? No phones, etc. So, and suddenly you had to have, in 2013, you had to have, one backend developer, one database developer, one iOS, one Android, one web, one front. Like, it's a bunch of people, and 90% of the time, what they spend, they're just rebuilding the obvious stuff that exists in other apps and websites, and they do the worst copies. So, and I was so frustrated that I opened my startup's web page or web app, and then I just see that a lot of the things are not as good as the same, features in other places. And I'm thinking, like, so instead of trying to build something new, the innovative, we're just struggling to rebuild the existing stuff first, and you just never end up moving to the important part. So that was my feeling, and of course we overcome that by spending years on rebuilding the obvious stuff, and then finally we get to build the interesting stuff. And then it took us time, like years and resources and a lot of investor money, etc. And then that was with third project, with fourth, with fifth, with sixth, and somewhere around project number 15, I realized that I have to build some system, at least for myself, where I can reuse the code, because I'm seeing that we can't do that. And I started building some little pet project on my own in the evenings that could do that. And I kept doing that for like 5 years. I've built like tons of different implementations on how you can share code. And most of them failed. But then eventually in 2018, at the end of that year, I came up with the idea that worked out, which was Mars. So basically it was like long story of pain, and then I just solved my own pain. And Mars didn't come as an idea for a startup. It was just an idea to solve my current pain. And only 2 years after, I realized that this is actually not solving only my pain, it's solving pain of my friends, because my friends were using, friends of my friends were using it. And suddenly we had 200 projects running on Mars. And I realized that Mars is actually a project that powers 200 projects. So it is a big thing, and I have to make a company out of it. So that's how it turned out.
Mm-hmm. So once you had the initial idea for Mars, what did you do with it? You mentioned you started building a platform and 200 projects were built on it, but what did that look like? How long did it take you to build that MVP, that first version of Mars?
It took me 3 months to build the first version. Actually, the version number 0, it took me 1 week. So I spent 1 week and I built very little thing just to, prove one little concept I had in my head. And it worked out, and that gave me enough motivation to go for the next 3 months to build the first MVP. But it was just the evenings. So I had my full-time main job. I was a CTO in the startup and also CTO in the other startup. So I had a lot of work. I had children. So I had to just do it at the nights. So I would just not sleep the night, or I slept like 4 hours a night. And then I would just sit with Mars for like 5 hours every night. And in 3 months, I had first version, and I used it myself. And it kind of worked good enough so that I could go on to build the second version. And every version took me like 3 months. And that's my rule. If you can't build something in 3 months, at least in my world, if you're a developer and you started building something, writing the code, 3 months, 3 months is the maximum. The biggest things in the world have been built in 3 months. You will be surprised, but the biggest things in the world haven't been built by 1 or 3 people in a very short time, right? Like great things either build fast and great, or it takes forever and the result is awful. So I use that concept, and that's why it helped me to push myself to make the decisions that were optimal rather than perfect. So, and then people were using it, and they were pushing me really hard, because once I gave access to Mars to my friends and to the projects, I would wake up in the morning and the Slack was having like 20 messages from them saying that, hey, this doesn't work. Hey, how this works? And can you add that thing? So I was thinking, all right, let's just do that. And then I just didn't feel the time, because every morning there would be feedback every morning, and I would just fix that, thinking that that's kind of end of the feedback. The next morning, the new feedback comes. So it was the loop. So I didn't notice the time, but then 2 years passed in that loop. I didn't even remember how many people were using it. I was just, busy with my main work. After main work, I would open the Slack. It was like a bunch of bug reports and improvement reports, and I would just fix them. But then I realized the thing that it won't work that way. It's too many reports, too many bug reports, too many improvement requests. And even if I have 20 people, it's still too many. It was like, the list got to hundreds already, not like 10 or 20. And there was very few users. If there was more users, it would be like thousands of reports. And then I thought, like, what if I do something that these guys can fix their problems on their own? If they can fix that stuff in Mars without asking me, right? And then I thought I could make it open source. But, the open source thing has high threshold. Like, it's not like you're using a library and suddenly you feel, oh, I want to change that little thing. Then you go and fork it and change it. It doesn't happen that way, because it's no way you can, quickly do that. You have to really, invest time. Then I thought I have to do something so that it's easy, so you don't have to switch the context. And then I realized probably the most important idea of Mars, the key moment of Mars, happened at that moment when I realized that I have to build Mars on Mars. So Mars has to be built on itself. If it's built on itself, then you can modify while using it right in it, right? So you open Mars IDE, you build in your project, and there is something wrong about the IDE. And imagine you can change IDE in the IDE, not leaving it, right? So that was kind of the concept. And I thought, like, well, nobody really has done it, like building, the platform on the platform, because like chicken and the egg problem. But I figured out a way to do that, and I did it really fast. So in 1 month, I managed to, implement that idea. And after that, the whole thing changed. So after that, I was just observing the people who were using Mars, and every day they would be just changing things on their own, because they see that something is wrong, they don't like it, they change it, they fix it. And I was just moderating it. I was just reviewing, moderating, but not really coding. And that was kind of this aha moment where I realized that, all right, so now Mars is a living organism. It will just keep evolving on its own with really high speed, because with open source projects, they evolve really slow, because it's high threshold to enter as contributor, because you have to contribute right into the main project, while in Mars, people were changing in their own project. So we made this model where they change in their own project, and we can, pull in all the changes, and we decide which change is good, and we incorporate in the main branch.
And how did you go from that to then building a team around Mars?
It happened naturally, because some people were more interested in contributing than the others. Some people were contributing almost half of their time, so they would just work half of the day with their project and half of the day contributing for Mars. Eventually they were doing it more and more, and at some point when we realized that we have to make a standalone startup, raise money, and go on to be a company, these people were ready for it, so we just invited them on board. So we never went out hunting or recruiting or anything like that. We had people already in the network using the stuff, and naturally they just get promoted into becoming core team members.
Mm-hmm. And how did you go about raising funding for Mars?
Raising funding was really simple comparing to all other startups. In my startups, I raised money 12 times in all the startups combined. Every time that was so difficult because we had to, it was full-time work. You had to just go from the meeting to meeting. It was the time before the Zoom. So you had to physically go to every meeting. And the investors were not the people who were, coming on time for the meetings, etc. So you would come and wait and wait and wait. The whole day is gone. And then the guy says, sends you a message, sorry, I couldn't make it, come tomorrow. So I would just go around this investor offices, and I would eventually raise the money because I was not giving up on going around. But with Mars, it was different. Investors actually reached out to us on their own. And that was kind of the sign where I realized that we have to make a company. So there was no company yet. We haven't registered. There was no website. There was no, we just got the name. There was no name even before for Mars. So we just had no name for the project. It was just a platform. And then some investors sent us a message saying, hey, some of our portfolio startups are using Mars and we don't know what Mars is. And they said, ask you, so do you have a website where we can look up? And I'm like, all right, I have to make a website. And then, so it's 2 years after, or 3 years after, I think, the first line of code in Mars, I launched the website. It was the other way around. Usually people make the website, they make the branding, and then they start building. So I did the other way. And then I had a couple of investors reaching out to me. They were interested in Mars because they felt this is a cool thing and their portfolio startups benefit a lot from it. And that pushed me to start the funding round. So I started the funding round in December 21, and by February, basically 1.5 months after that, closed it. That's where we raised the money. So we had quite good interest. We had more interest than we wanted. So we had a lot of VCs and angels who were interested. But then we decided that since Mars is an open source and is community-based project, it's very dangerous to go with too many investors at the beginning, because then it's hard to give it to the community. Then you have to become very greedy corporation. So, and then I realized that probably we should not get money from big VCs now, because that will put a lot of agreements and the small text of what we can do and can't do, and etc. So I ended up raising only from angels. With the agreement that they never going to tell me what to do and never going to ask anything, and they said yes. So we raised money from angels. We said to the VCs that we will come back for Series A if we feel like money can actually change something for us. And we're not sure yet if that will ever happen. Like, there is one path for Mars where we will succeed and accomplish our vision just with a community-based approach, because we don't burn a lot of money. Like 90% of the stuff happening in Mars happens through the community. We don't pay for it, right? We don't have to pay for it. So that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And looking to the future, what do you think the future of programming looks like? And do you think Mars fits into that?
Well, I think future programming is going to be very different from what you and I see now, because it's been really long since nothing has changed. So if you look at the big picture, like helicopter view, programming has changed for last 25 to 30 years. It's been like this since 90s, and it's everything has changed, but not the way people create software. Some people say that some things just can't change, so this will stay that way forever. I don't think so. I think there will be a natural next step of the software development process, which is increasing the level of abstraction. So basically, what's happening with software from the beginning is that the goal of software development is to translate what I think into machine codes. Like that's kind of two ends of it, right? Then, well, we can't read my mind, so we take what I say and transfer that to the developer. Like, let's say I transfer that to you. You take that and you transfer that into the specification, and then maybe the next developer or yourself transfer that into the programming code, and the programming code compiles that into the machine code, and machine code goes to the hardware, right? So I think that long step process is going to be shorter and shorter and shorter, and now we're in a place where it's short enough so it takes quite little time to create software comparing to 1970, for example, where you had to use punch cards. But it's still very abstract. Like, for example, if I'm creating software and I need a button that saves something to the database, I have to operate really abstract things such as hyperlink, click, API requests. So it's like a lot of little things that are not similar at all to the way I think. When I think, I'm thinking like, I want that field to be saved on my profile, and ideally that has to translate right into the machine codes. So that's what we do in Mars. So in Mars, the microapps, they encapsulate this regular programming code into more human readable code. So we have a microapp called, let's say, the search, right? And if you need a search for anything, let's say you have a movie website and you need to search for movies, imagine you could just, write, render the movie search. That's it. That's what you want to write. But with React and Next.js and all those things, you would have to create a bunch of commands, codes on backend, front end, and et cetera, et cetera. But in fact, you're doing very obvious thing. You're searching for movies, right? But there's no shortcut for that. So I think the future of programming is creating this level of abstraction where I can talk features, not abstract, like, button, div, h1, h2, like these things they have no meaning. We just give it a meaning, right? Like, what is h1? It can be a text, can be something else, right? But what is movie search? It's a movie search, can't be anything else than movie search, right? So that's what we do, and that's what I see some of the other people are realizing who are deep into this space, and I think that's the future. So you'll write a lot less code because the words you write gonna mean a lot more than they mean now, but it will still be code. It will not go to, some people think the code will be eliminated and we will use visual interface and drag and drop. No, because drag and drop works for certain cases, for example, for website for a company, right? But not for the logic, not for the algorithms. If you try to create algorithm with visual language and with code, and you look at both, the code looks a lot simpler. Now, in the code, you can have 25 rules, and you see them. In the interface, 25 rules will be displayed all over the place. It's hard to grasp, right? So I think we won't get rid of the coding using text, but the text will mean a lot more. So we'll write not 100 lines of code, but 10. But later, not 100, but 1.
Well, yeah, thank you so much, John. This has really been amazing. And, we'll put MarsX and your LinkedIn and everything in the show notes below for the listeners to connect with you. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.